Hello, greetings from beautiful and sunny Cleveland, Ohio. My name is Steve Malbassa, and I will be talking to you about barbed wire. The development of barbed wire, how it has helped as a technology to win the open range, the social construct, and the implication behind this development of technology back in the day, and some of the applications for how it is still used today in some ways, some shapes, and some forms, as well as a little bit of the history behind the development of barbed wire. In 1873, frontiersmen realized the opportunity that existed in the harsh western lands. Settlers went west by the scores to uh, establish new homesteads, make better lives for themselves. Demand for food and beef rose, making cattle more valuable. Men needed laws to keep good fences as a result, but they didn't have means of making these good fences. Before then, there was no usable fencing that existed for the early pioneer. Cattle would roam off. Therefore, so would dollars and food, sustenance. If good fences made good neighbors, the Old West at this time didn't have any of either. Some of this is truly what made the West wild. And as you'll see, barbed wire didn't really stop all the wildness from the West. In 1873, three men, Joseph Glidden, Jacob Haish, and Isaac Elwood, each man had the idea to improve fencing by attaching the spikes or barbs directly to a piece of wire. It could keep cattle in the pasture and establish boundaries between neighbors, make happy cowboys, and thus, barbed wire as a social construct meant that we have this new technology to use to settle disputes of property lines. There was some resistance, obviously, as there always is with technology. One guy was the big land baron of the Texas Gulf Coast, a guy named Abel Shanghai Pierce. Claimed as long as there is water runs and grass grows here, this will be open prairie. And Abe was not exactly a guy who was going to soft sell his opinions. In some instances, other problems with barbed wire is it did herd cattle back to already overgrazed land. Some smaller ranchers are being squeezed out of business. As means of fighting this, smaller ranchers originally just cut fences, and it grew into open warfare. Blood was shed in several cases, and some of the cases are pretty famous, including the Johnson County War of Wyoming of 1892, which is another story for another time. Barbed wire eventually became king in the open West, with legislation to protect barbed wire and further legislation to promote homesteading. The frontier had been won. The open range was gone, and in its place was pastures fenced in by barbed wire. Kansas, laws about the use of barbed wire fence came about, along with statutes providing for breaching of fences and rights of recovery of livestock that may have wandered off. Originally, theft of barbed wire was just about impossible to prove. You could cut any wire any way, and it wasn't like there were cameras out on the range there. So they came up with designer barbed wire. There were 2-loop strands, 3-loop strands. Loops were 1 inch apart, 2 inches apart. They were used to identify a particular owner's type of barbed wire, and then it got more creative and interesting from there. Today, variants are still used in military settings. There is something called concertina wire, which you see in the slide right there. Sometimes you'll see one strand of it that can pretty easily be stepped on and then over, but 3 strands are going to need some strong wire cutters. And if you are dumb enough to get caught in triple concertina wire, if you're dumb enough to try and run through it, frankly, you deserve what you get. Still very much used in tactical military settings. Here, in prisons, they use razor wire. As you can see, razor wire is even more forbidding. The barbs on it are such that once you get into it, you're going to have a devil of a time to try and get out. However, there are still some inmates that occasionally do this, and trying to get them out requires some intense wire cutters and some corrections officers who think, what am I getting paid to do here? These are some of the works that are cited. Some of these websites are pretty interesting, and this concludes a very short introduction into the use of barbed wire and how it has been used to settle the open range. Again, my name is Steve Malbassa. I'm greeting you from Cleveland, Ohio, and thank you very much for your time.